When the European settlers came to Wendell in the 1750s, every homestead was a farm, and every adult was a farmer. Like other early settlers, families had to grow their own food, which might include corn, wheat, rye, barley, beans, squash, and oats, using farming techniques learned from the Native Americans. As the decades wore on, some identified more with their specific trades, like blacksmithing, shoemaking, and stone cutting. But farming was still an essential part of survival.
Before things industrialized, pretty much everybody had to farm. You had to have some way to grow food of your own or to access food. And there was always trade. It's a misapprehension that the idea that nobody ever traded until after industrialism started. There was always small-scale trade within communities. Women often, the farming that women did, so the butter, the eggs, that was often for making a bit of, called pin money, but making some cash money, and any surplus that people had, they would find ways to barter or trade or sell. But mostly, you had to have some kind of access to land and some kind of skill for growing food.
In 1840, a full 9 years before the railroad arrived, the population of Wendell was 875. There were 122 farms, which accounted for 80% of our citizens' livelihoods. In 1848, the historian John Warner Barber wrote,
Wendell is mostly a farming town, composed of scattered plantations. The surface is uneven, but not much precipitous. The Miller's River, which forms the northern boundary of the town, is here a fine stream, and adds much to the beauty and fertility of this lowest part of the township.
But with poor soil conditions overall and a short growing season, farmers soon turned to raising livestock. Chickens, hens, and ducks provided much-needed food staples, while sheep, cattle, and horses grazed the fields, hillsides, and rocky soils of our rural town. Throughout the 19th century, and even to this day, the raising of livestock has remained an important part of the agriculture in Wendell, Massachusetts. The house, which still stands, is 1.5 miles west of Wendell Center. The farm consisted of 40 acres of woodland, about 100 acres of mowing and pasturing, which furnished support for a few sheep, a pair of working cattle, and a few cows. We were early put to work. Father procured a small scythe for Brother Addison when he was 11 years old, with which he followed and kept up with Father. We often had our stint chopping wood, hoeing, etc. My older sisters began to do the housework, as Mother was frail and could do but little besides direct. They also braided straw, and in that way bought their clothing. The straw was of rye, cut when full-grown and green, whitened, split with little hand machines, width of about 1/16 of an inch, braided with 7 strands. They would braid, in a day fully occupied, 20 to 30 yards. Palm leaf hat braiding was introduced about 1830 and supplanted straw braiding, but the confinement proved injurious to health. Reverend Warren H. Beeman, Reminiscences of Life in Wendell, 1905.
In 1841, George Beeman Richardson purchased 57 acres of what is now Martha Senn's farm from shoemaker and Congregational Church Secretary Samuel Brewer for $1,050, and he built his home there. Later purchases made him owner of the land where both our town hall and our police department now stand. Richardson built his chair-making shop where the police department is, and he donated the land where town hall is to the Baptist Church. Richardson played a prominent role in the relocation of the Baptist Church building from its original location at the junction of Morse Village Road and New Salem Road to where it now stands as Town Hall. In 1852, Richardson sold his farm and home and moved to Montague. For the next 25 years, the property was bought and sold a handful of times, ending with its purchase by Stephen Ballou in 1877. When Stephen Ballou died, the property, known as the Summit House, went to his grandson, Cecil S. Ballou, who sold it to Walter Ranger, who then sold it to Glenn O. Ellis. Glenn Ellis left the Summit House building and land to his sons, Jack and Donald Ellis.
Dear Jack, I just wanted you to know that I love you an awful lot. So much sometimes it hurts. I know I don't show it or act it, but that's me. This noon, I just wanted you to hug me and never let me go. But I guess that's the way the cookie crumbles. Please, Jack, don't go out on me, 'cause I am true to you whether you believe it or not. Call you Saturday night after 9. Please be home. All my love forever. Doris.
The night Jack Ellis died, he was attending a jam-packed special town meeting at the old Wendell Town Hall. Emotions were high because the 3-article warrant was controversial. The meeting was the culmination of a summer of heated complexities regarding the town's response to a massive proposed subdivision by Richard C. Wolfe of all his extensive land holdings between Locke's Village Road and Lock Hill, opposite his lands at what was known as Stillwater Pond. It was a tense meeting. Jack Ellis, a frugal and well-loved Yankee farmer from an old prominent Wendell family, was a kind and gentle man who helped everyone who asked with his oxen team. He was on the side of the few who felt that development would be good for the town. He raised his hand and was recognized. He spoke only a few words against the expense of the town purchasing the land. Emotions grew more intense and focused. When the vote on the first article was taken, it was resoundingly in favor of town purchase of the land. During discussion on the article about borrowing the funds for the purchase, Jack Ellis rose. He was sitting in the fourth row on the left side of the hall. I watched as he reached out his hand and tickled the pom-pom on the top of Mrs. Herrick's tam, who was sitting in front of him, and then he left the room to go out into the night. A few minutes later, a voice from outside called out, "Jack is down!" Someone called my name. My instinct was to respond. As moderator, I called the meeting to recess. Outside, it had stopped raining and the asphalt was shining. Jack Ellis lived in the beautiful large white family legacy farmhouse on the common near the town hall. There was a small circle of people kneeling around Jack, who was lying on the ground, in the wet grass, under his large maple. Nancy Spittle and another person who said he was a firefighter from another town were giving CPR. Nancy and I, both RNs, took over and worked as a team to try to revive Jack. When the ambulance came, the lights were bright. Jack was lifted into the ambulance by EMTs. I could see Don Ellis, Jack's brother, standing outside the house alone, watching, lit by the glow of the flashing lights. I returned inside the town hall to find the huge crowd waiting and murmuring in low voices. People had observed a respectful vigil. They waited quietly while I went into the bathroom to change into fresh clothes I had brought to give to Annie Diamond. Their somber patience filled me with awe. I reconvened the meeting and requested a moment of silence honoring Jack and our hope for his recovery. Jack would have wanted us to be practical and finish business, which we did. The proposed subdivision is now protected as a wildlife management area, as remembered by me, Kathy Ann Becker.
Martha Senn. I grew up in Miller's Falls, about a mile from the Wendell line, down by the ranger station. Donnie Ellis had been a friend of the family for many years. In fact, in later years, my brothers, Randy and Larry, used to come up and help him maintain the farm, so they worked for him, keeping the fields open, cutting wood, you name it. And my brother, Larry, used to bring his cows up in the fall. and keep his fields down. So I used to spend a lot of time up here, riding around through Wendell and here at the farm. Some people like dogs, some people like cats. I like horses. They're smarter than dogs, very attached, as you can see. So these are my other kids, 6 Morgans and a miniature horse. This is Talon. He's our little mischievous troublemaker. If he can get into trouble, he does.
What kind of trouble?
Going out the fences to visit the neighbors, wandering around town before coming home. He's kind of the ringleader. He'll get the other ones to follow him. This is actually his mother, Sabrina. She's our old girl. She's over 30 years old. And he was actually born on the farm to her and my stallion. So he was born and bred here. And this is my other old girl, Onyx. And then her daughter, Lacey, followed by Outlaw. It's basically been my sanctuary. My hope for the future is that my grandsons and their families get to enjoy it as much as I have and love it as much as I have.
So if we want to have younger farmers being able to farm and have land, it's likely going to be in an upland place. If we want to have farms in an upland place, you need the animals for the fertility, right? And for what makes sense to farm here. The thing that really matters with this is scale, and to talk more about scale and to differentiate. So it's not like all meat is good or bad. Factory farming and farming meat at a gigantic scale is crazy. It's crazy ecologically, it's crazy maybe morally, it's terrible for the animals, for the soil. It's crazy in so many ways. So if you differentiate between that and smaller scale, and to think about how do we support and bring back the smaller scale and that mix of scales, because it does make sense to grow some things at a larger scale, but to really look at, what is destructive of the environment, what is destructive of communities. And I think that's an important thing, is that Wendell still is a close-knit community, and people have hung on to that here. But how to keep agriculture part of that is you've got to be rebuilding these sort of small-scale networks and not be too pure about like having one single answer to all the problems of the farming economy that we've developed over more than 200 years now.